in, breath touches our nostrils, reach our lungs, expanding lungs and expanding lower abdomen. As we breathe out, lower abdomen contracts, chest area contracts, the breath leaves our nostrils. These are three functions that take place every time we breathe in and out. There is no variation. At the same time, we notice feelings, perceptions, thoughts, consciousness arise and pass away much faster than the breath. And then the body relaxes, mind relaxes, breath relaxes. When everything is relaxed, in that relaxed state of mind let go of our clinging, craving, or trying to hold on to anything that arises, or trying to reject anything. This is the way how our first hindrance, greed, fades away. When greed fades away, the body and mind become even more relaxed, loosen up. At that time, there will not be any rigidity, uptightness. That state opens for the feeling of loving friendliness, metta. So the resentment fades away. When the resentment fades away, we get even more energetic. Or when metta arises, compassion arises along with that. Compassion is for all living beings whom we know are in pain and suffering. And then compassion arises, restlessness and worry fades away. When restlessness and worry fades away, then sleepiness and drowsiness fade away. When we become more energetic, more encouraged to continue the practice. And we cannot fall asleep. Generally, people fall asleep when they lose interest or lethargic. That will disappear when we see the results. Then we also see the results more clearly and deeply, which build up our confidence, trust in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, our practice. When confidence arises, doubt fades away. When doubt fades away, confidence arises. Now we equipped with all this, joy arises. Joy is a result of seeing the reality. And then that leads to tranquility, passaddhi. Tranquility makes us even more relaxed and peaceful and calm. In that state, happiness arises. Happiness is not excitement, but a calm, deeply calm state of mind. When happiness arises, happy mind leads to concentration. Sukhino chittang samahadhyati. Sukhino of the person full of happiness, chittang the mind, gains concentration. Samadhiti attains samadhi, concentration. When samadhi or concentration arises, mind becomes very sharp, clear, and can see things as they really are. That is called samahitam kittam yatha bhutam pajanati. Concentrated mind sees things as they really are. These things are the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. These are the things. Concentrated mind sees them as they really are. They really are in a state of flux, changing, appearing, and disappearing. When all these aggregates appear and disappear constantly, that is what we call impermanence. They are impermanent. When we see impermanence, our rigidity, uptightness, and also our very deeply rooted notion of self disappears. That is a very powerful achievement, very meaningful achievement, a life changing achievement. Let us see how this happens. dukkhappata cha nidukkha bhayappata cha nibbhaya sokappata cha nisoka hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. With this metta thought in mind, let us focus our mind on the talk that I am going to give now on the last part of the aggregates, that is aggregates of consciousness. Consciousness is one of the 5 aggregates. Why it is called aggregates? Because there are more than one consciousness. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. Since there are more than one consciousness, all of them clustered or put together and called aggregates. So today we focus on this. This meditation on this aggregate also is the same as the other aggregates. So Buddha says such is consciousness, such its rise origin, and such its passing away. So a meditator on the 5 aggregates take up consciousness. As we mentioned several times in the past, consciousness is not something that we can locate or isolate from everything else. But when we talk, explain the Dhamma, we have to take some consciousness as an entity, as a part of the aggregates. For this purpose, the meditator has to understand how we use consciousness as a part of our meditation. Uh, in places like Anguttara Nikaya and Samyutta Nikaya, it is said Kammang Kettang Vijnanang Bijang. Vijnana is the seed of our karma. What you call consciousness is the seed where karma is planted. Kammang Kettang Vijnanam Bijang. Vijnana bija, vijnana seed is planted in karma field. So this is very important thing to remember, and yet consciousness is compared to magic. Mayupamacha vijnanam. In Samyutta Nikaya, Buddha gave 5 similes for the 5 aggregates. The similes are given in a summary. Phena pindupamang rupang, Vedana bubbulupama, Marichukupama sanya, Sankara mayupamacha vinyana, Desana dityabandhuna. Phena pindupamang kayang, Vedana bubbulupamang, Marichukupama sanya, Sankara kadalupama. Mayupamacha vinyanam. That is Phena pindupamang rupang. The form 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 is compared to FOAM form. When we see a form, a bunch of collection of little bubbles, they appear to us as some solid object. That is how we see the form, our body or any other form, anywhere in the world. But they in reality are collection of various particles, cells, elements, earth, air, water, fire elements. All these elements, all these components come together to make us, to give us an appearance of a form. Form, FORM. Then Vedana bubbulupama. Vedana means feelings, feelings compared to bubbles appearing and disappearing. When we look at water in a pond or river or somewhere, when rain drops on it, rain water, every drop creates a bubble. But immediately that those bubbles will vanish, disappear. Similarly, the feeling arises, all kind of feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. The other day we mentioned 108 kinds of feelings. All these feelings appear and disappear. As quickly as they appear, they disappear. Then Marichukupama Sanya, third aggregate, Sanya perceptions. Perception is compared to mirage. Mirage also is something very clearly appear to us as water. It is called Marichi in Pali because it deceives deer. And deer thirsty in very hot day, looking for water. In front of him there is water. So he runs towards that to drink. The water goes farther away and he runs and runs. Then he stops and looks back. When he looks back, he will see water behind. He has left water behind. And then he runs back. And so he could run back and forth looking for, trying to drink that mirage. But he cannot drink the mirage. It is just a delusion, deceptive appearance, visual deception. Then Mayupamacha Vijnana. Vijnana is compared to magics. Buddha asked, is there any essence in magics? We all watch magics, and the person who tricks us. He knows all the tricks. He tricks, and the tricks itself has nothing in it, but he has something beside the trick to show us. The trick is called magic. So in the magic, in the trick, there is nothing. It is just deception. Mayupama vijnana. So Kadalupama Rupam Vedana Bulupa Marichupa Sanya Sankara Kadalupama. Sankara means formations we discussed yesterday compared to banana plantain. Banana tree, if you cut across, you would not see any solid core in it. Everything can be peeled off, and yet it gives us an impression that it has a solid or core or hard wood. So are the similes that Buddha given to explain these five aggregates for us to understand better. So this vijnana also purified through the training of the mind. When the mind is purified without any stain in it, that is called anidarsana vijnana. Anidarsana vijnana, darsana means the mirror. In the mirror, you can see objects reflecting. When there is nothing to reflect, the mirror is just shining without any object in front of it. The consciousness free from all mental states, defilements, thoughts, and so forth can be made free from all defilements. So that is the nature of consciousness. But there was a monk in the time of the Buddha. His name is Sati. This is a very famous story. We see this in Majjhima Nikaya, Volume 1, Sutra number 38. We have this discourse, very interesting, profound discourse on the collection of greed. Maha is called Maha Tanha Sankaya Sutta. Tanha means greed. Maha means big, large, great. Sankaya means collection. How we, living beings, collect craving through not understanding consciousness. Venerable Sati, of course, he ordained under the Buddha, and he went on telling people this, as I understood the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that turns and wanders through the rounds of rebirths, not another. So he thought it is the same consciousness that goes from life to life. Perhaps Venerable Sati might have thought of the Buddha's previous life, or he was born in many different forms, and he himself has mentioned that he was able to recall many previous lives, and therefore seeing, hearing and thinking of these stories, Venerable Sati might have thought that it is the same consciousness that goes from life to life. So this is what he was very uh, convinced, and he was telling his brother, fellow monks, this is as I understood the Dhamma taught by the Buddha, it is the same consciousness that goes from life to life. But the monks try to uh, dissuade him from that belief, and they said, brother, don't say that, don't misrepresent the Buddha, that is very harmful. You will be known in future for misrepresenting the Buddha. That is not that harmful, but the more harm you can cause is making others believe that it is the same consciousness that goes from life to life. Then it will defeat the very fundamental teachings of the Buddha, that is non-self, nothing permanent, everything is impermanent. If everything is impermanent, how can you say the same consciousness goes from life to life? Don't say that. They tried to persuade him to give up, but he did not. Then they went and reported this to the Buddha. Buddha asked him to come. When he came, he asked, is it true that you have been telling people that you have been, that what I taught was the same consciousness that goes from life to life? Venerable Sati said, yes, Venerable Sir, that is how I understood. Then Buddha reprimanded him, asked him, whom have you heard me telling that the same consciousness goes from life to life? So he just asked other monks in front of Venerable Sati, do monks, do you also understand the Dhamma as I taught, just as Sati understands? They said, no, Venerable Sir. Do you think that I taught the same consciousness goes from life to life? They said, no, Venerable Sir. Then Buddha gave a very simple, beautiful simile, a beautiful way of, beautifully he explained the how consciousness arises. In our meditation, it is said one must know consciousness and uh, and such its origin, such its cessation or passing away. So, this is how it arises, this is how it passes away. So Buddha explained it in a very famous uh, paragraph in Ma Tanna Sankhya Sutta. Because consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the I and forms, it is reckoned as I consciousness. We recognize it as I consciousness. So similarly, when consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odor, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises depend on the tongue and the flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises depend on the body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Just as fire is reckoned by the particular condition dependent on which it burns, for instance, when fire burns dependent on logs, it is reckoned as a log fire. When fire burns dependent on faggots, it is reckoned as faggots fire. When fire burns dependent on grass, it is reckoned as a grass fire. When fire burns dependent on cow dung, it is reckoned as cow dung fire. When fire burns dependent on shaft, it is reckoned as shaft fire. When fire burns dependent on rubbish, it is reckoned as rubbish fire. These are examples. So too consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition depend on which it arises. When consciousness arises depend on the I and forms, it is reckoned as I consciousness and so forth. So we have 6 kinds of consciousness: I consciousness, ear consciousness and so forth. They get their name depending on the faculty, sense, eye, ear, nose and so forth. Now we all understand when I and object come together, that instant consciousness arises. It happens so quickly that there is no way to separate them, to isolate consciousness from the object and the I, because as soon as the I and object meet, consciousness arises. If consciousness does not arise at that very moment, even though eyes are open, objects are in front of the eye, nobody can know the object. Nobody can know that one sees. And seeing happened when these three plus contact come together. For instance, eye, visual objects, consciousness and contact. These 4 events take place so quickly, at unimaginably quickly, that it is almost impossible for someone to separate consciousness from all. Even the contact meeting, we can see separately I and the object because they are separate things, separated by space and distance. So, however, consciousness is known in Pali as Vijnana. Vijnana means Vijanana. Vijanana means knowing things separately. That means the factor that can separate object. So the factor that does the separation, eye and visual objects, the consciousness can know this is I, that is object. And then consciousness is involved in the eye and the object, and therefore, as it arises, it cannot look at itself any significant time because it happens so quickly. Consciousness is involved in these four events: eye, real object, and contact, consciousness. These four events, of course, take place so quickly. However, in explanation, we have to use that. We have to separate them, separately talk about them. Just like when we talk about water, we hydrogen and oxygen content H2O. In science lab, we use the formula H2O, but we cannot separate oxygen from hydrogen in the water. But the, when we use water all the time, but we don't see all of them. In ordinary language, we also don't use that formula. Ordinary language, we use water. Similarly, consciousness, even though it does a major part of our knowing, separating things, it is not easy for regular, ordinary eyes or eyes to know it. Only the consciousness knows what consciousness is. That is the very special thing. Like knife cannot cut itself, but knife can cut anything outside. But but the consciousness not only knows or separates other things, but also consciousness knows that it is consciousness. That is a very special thing. So, therefore, Buddha said that consciousness itself does not arise without an object. When it arises from the particular, depending on particular thing, then that moment consciousness knows that it arose dependent on such and such an object. Therefore, this is a very fine, actually the finest, subtlest awareness in the practice of meditation. And that is why the Buddha asks us to be very mindful and pay attention to ourselves. It happens so quickly. That is why when Buddha talked to Bahya Daruchirya, so to be aware of seeing as just seeing. In that word, seeing as seeing, everything is included. Only when you are very sharp in your mindfulness, your awareness, you can see this package, whole package of I, of form, consciousness, and contact. And if you try to analyze, criticize, then you will miss the very subtle point. And therefore, the meditator has to, this is why from the very beginning we talk about being mindful in the present moment. The Satipatthana Sutta began, Parimukhaṃ satim. The mindfulness should be focused on what is happening here and now, this very moment in front of us. In front doesn't mean spatial front, but in front in time, temporal front. That means it happens so quickly and we should be able to catch it that quickly as it happens. So, friends, this is the last section of the five aggregates. You can see how deep and profound they are and how clearly can we understand them only when we are mindful and concentrated. I repeat every day, when we gain concentration, we can see the subtlest impermanence or changes taking place. And that is how we see our consciousness changing so quickly. If we do not, if we cling to it, then that is Nandi. Nandi means cling, and Nandi means delight, and that delight we catch. We try to hold on to. Ya Nandi, Tang, what do you call, Upadhyati. Nandi Upadhyati. We try to hold on to the desire that arises, and we can avoid that and let things appear and disappear as they do, and that is called seeing things as they really are. I think with this I want to end this morning's talk and continue our metta recital. Metta, what you call wish. We have we were we want to wish all those who are suffering to be free from suffering and live long to continue their Dhamma practice and liberate themselves from samsaric suffering. May those who are grieving the passing away their loved ones, may they recover from that very soon. I know it is not very easy, but through the understanding of Dhamma, through the practice of Dhamma, they certainly can do that. And may that happen to them very quickly and return to normal health and continue their healthy life to practice Dhamma and attain liberation from samsaric suffering. May those who are in hospitals taken care of by doctors, nurses, and hospital staffs, may they continue to take care of them with utmost compassion and dedication without themselves being affected, inflicted by this virus, and continue their wonderful service. May they also live long in peace, happiness, and liberate from samsaric suffering. And there are many generous people who are supporting these projects, various projects to help people. May they continue their very wonderful generosity to help the world, and may they live long in peace and attain liberation. And there are leaders who have done marvelous job in their own way, and some of them are very successful. Others, and may they continue their wonderful service and live long in good health and attain liberation from samsara. And others who may not have been able to do what people expect them to do, may they have patience, courage, understanding, and determination, above all, wisdom and understanding to make right decision, wise decision for the benefit of others. With this, I want to end this morning session. Thank you very much for joining us.